Hello there. Welcome to Blitz Transmissions. I'm Tommy, and this is going to be the start of a series of videos that I do kind of sporadically here on the channel. I'm kind of just having some thoughts, and I figured, you know what, I don't want to make this into a full podcast episode. You know, some of these are going to be a little ranty, some of these are going to be a little rambly. I have yet to name what I'm going to call these types of videos for the channel, but this is really just going to be me sitting down for probably like 10 to 15 minutes total, just yapping, just kind of racking my brain on some thoughts I've had about a specific topic that has to do with Star Wars. Now, if you couldn't tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about the Acolyte Season 2 being canceled and publicly announced by Disney and Lucasfilm. And again, just a little brief disclaimer before I really get into the meat and potatoes of my points here. I just want to say I'm a Star Wars fan through and through. I enjoy Star Wars for what it is, not what I wanted it to be, not what I expected. I just enjoy being in the universe. You know, the Acolyte definitely was not my favorite personally. I just wanted to kind of share my thoughts on why it bugs me that Disney and Lucasfilm have canceled the Acolyte Season 2 or any future Acolyte content for that matter on screen. As I just said, the Acolyte Season 1 was a very mixed bag for me. Personally, I felt like they dove into a plethora of issues at a very shallow level, and it kind of felt directionless towards the end because a lot of characters just didn't gravitate towards me as the viewer, and I just wish I would have cared more about certain characters, namely Osha and May. I thought the fighting was fantastic in the show. In my opinion, it's some of the best action we've seen in Star Wars since the prequel trilogy. I think they did great, and they should definitely bring that choreographer back for future Star Wars projects. I do really enjoy some of the additions that this show brought to the Star Wars universe, like Chimere, aka the Stranger. I'm sure that that's a very common opinion amongst the Star Wars fandom. I also really enjoyed the look into the Jedi. I liked seeing both sides of the perspective of decisions that Jedi have to make. Whether you think they are right or wrong, Jedi have to make some very difficult decisions in the heat of the moment. And the show introduced some really cool things, namely Darth Plagueis for the first time on screen ever. And that leads me into why I'm upset about the show being canceled going forward. Regardless of how I felt about the show, you know, for me it was probably like a 6 or a 7 out of 10, as opposed to, you know, some other Star Wars projects I consider a 9 or a 10. I really wanted to see more of this story. Hearing that Disney and Lucasfilm canceled any future content for the show is really truly a bummer, and that's because I wanted to see story threads wrap up. We left everything so open-ended. You don't know what's going to happen with Vernestra. You know, possibly is she the Jedi Master that Chimere had? I know they really heavily alluded to that, but we never got a definitive answer there. She goes and talks to Jedi Master Yoda, of all the characters in Star Wars, and they give him this like Marvel Cinematic Universe cameo at the very end. And they're not even going to go anywhere with it now, as far as we know, at least not in the Acolyte story, even though it was now a very major plot thread they introduced at the end of the last episode. We have this weird little love ? Relationship between Chimere and Osha now, and I really wanted to see where that was going to go, because obviously Plagueis knows what Chimere is up to, and will he have a problem with Chimere taking on an Acolyte of his own? We won't know. Another thing we won't know is how this senator that's trying to dig into the Jedi gets ultimately, I'd assume, his mission accomplished, because the Jedi are very involved with the Senate and report to the Senate in the time of the prequel trilogy. So how does that end up happening? I wish we could have seen more of that. I was really intrigued by the senator's character that talks to Vernestra at the very end of the show. There's just so many things that I wish we could have seen more of with this show. And again, the biggest one for me, the biggest blaring one, is Darth Plagueis. The casual Star Wars fan who doesn't read comics, doesn't read books, you know, doesn't know anything, is just going to see this nameless character, as far as they know, peer around a corner and look at Chimere and Osha as they take off on the planet that we can only assume is Baldemnik from the Darth Plagueis novel. And again, this is all just assumptions on my end. We have no idea what this planet's actual name is in universe. We have no idea, you know, how Darth Plagueis would play out further into the Star Wars story. It just really is disappointing. There are so many plot threads that I would have liked to have seen expanded upon, especially since they were introduced so late into the show. show. But again, like I was saying, the average viewer, the casual casual surface level Star Wars fan only knows Darth Plagueis by name, as is mentioned in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. They don't know that this guy's immune or what he looks like or what his species is or anything like that. They just are going to see this character and go, oh, well, I guess we'll never get anything on him then. And that's super disappointing to me, especially as a lifelong diehard fan. And I guess this kind of speaks to a larger issue that I've had specifically the last 5 to 7 years with the Disney Star Wars era, as we're calling it. And this issue that I have is this mentality that Disney and Lucasfilm have of just abandoning ship and just jumping ship on so many different projects. I could go down an extremely long laundry list, and whether it's directly the fault of a writer walking away or, Lucasfilm trashing a project or an actor getting fired or a developing company canceling something, there's just so many things with Star Wars that get announced or are alluded to that just never get expanded upon. I guess my issue is that the cancellation of The Acolyte Season 2 is kind of speaking to the larger issue that this is their track record when it comes to Star Wars. If you look at the last 5 to 7 years, you'll see so many directors that have been set up to do Star Wars movies, and then, Hollywood Reporter or Variety does an article saying, oh, this person's directing a Star Wars movie, or they announce it at San Diego Comic-Con or Star Wars Celebration, and they say, look, everyone, this director that made this little cinematic thing is going to be showing up to write and direct a Star Wars movie. Look at Patty Jenkins and Rogue Squadron, Rian Johnson and his Star Wars trilogy, which we don't know if it's ever coming out, Taika Waititi and his Star Wars movie. The guys that wrote Game of Thrones were supposed to write a Star Wars movie, and then they walked away because of creative differences. And that's just directors with movies. We could go into other series, like series that were officially announced, like Rangers of the New Republic. Obviously, we knew that Gina Carano's character, Cara Dune, was supposed to be the main character of that show. She ultimately got fired from Lucasfilm, and regardless of what happened and how she got fired, why did they have to cancel that whole entire show? There are so many other Star Wars characters that could have filled her role. We have Carson Teva, General Harrison Dula, so many other characters, even Zeb Aurelios. We had so many other Star Wars characters that have already been shown on screen that could have filled that role. I think the most famous one of these is the cancellation of the trilogy of movies that was supposed to come from Solo: A Star Wars Story. And to be fair, I'm not saying that any of these stories would be amazing or the most groundbreaking, fruitful storytelling we've ever had in Star Wars, and I'm also not saying that all of these writers and directors would be the best picks for Star Wars movies or shows. But seriously, it's just gotten very frustrating to me as a fan. I feel like I'm at a point where I just can't get excited for anything anymore. Perfect example, Disney recently announced 3 new Star Wars movies and brought the directors on the stage. We had Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy coming on for a Rey movie that takes place, after Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. You had Dave Filoni come on stage and talk about his movie that's going to be coming out. You have the movie that's coming out from James Mangold called Dawn of the Jedi. And then, of course, you have the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. I think that's the most likely of those 4 to come out. But again, I want to be excited for all of these, and I feel like I just can't be. And that's just mainly because of the track record that Disney and Lucasfilm have of just canceling projects, abandoning ship, running away, tucking their tail. At the very least, even if the story's not great, like again, I know a lot of people did not like the story that was told in the Acolyte series. My thing is, at least commit. Then instead of doing 2 more seasons or 3 more seasons, finish it off, make it 1 more season. You could even make it a limited series with just 3 or 4 episodes and commit and finish the story. I'd rather have them do what they did with the sequel trilogy, where they tell, as many people say, a mediocre story and have the story just tied in a bow and complete, rather than just be left wondering what's going to happen with all these story threads. Like I said, I'm a Star Wars fan. I love the Star Wars universe. I would like to at least have some sort of resolution on these characters' stories, and I don't want to have to turn to the next Marvel comic run or the next Dark Horse comic run or, some encyclopedia where there's alluded to in a detail in their costume what happens to them ultimately. It's really frustrating, and again, just as a Star Wars fan, I want to see more Star Wars. Of course, I want the storytelling to be great. I want the acting and the production to be great as well, but ultimately, I just want stories that are told that are finished. And I feel like The Acolyte specifically could have really benefited from a season 2, even again, if it was a limited series of maybe 3 or 4 episodes. They could have really benefited from that. Because now we've established all our characters, and even though The Acolyte kind of just kept bringing on more and more topics and more characters throughout the show, I feel like they could have really honed in on just a few with the season 2, finished things out, and again, I really hope that Disney and Lucasfilm kind of double back on that later on, even if it's bringing these characters into a different series and just finishing their stories that way. I'd be okay with that. But again, I want Disney and Lucasfilm to just commit. And I hope that I'm speaking not just for myself, but for other Star Wars fans when I say that. Like with the sequel trilogy, the story's over. It's done. You can like it, you can not like it, but at least we can all agree that that story is concluded. But with that, those are just my brief thoughts. I just kind of wanted to get up on the camera here and spitball a little bit about how I felt about why this is bugging me. And again, I think it's not really so much specifically the Acolyte being canceled that's bugging me. It's all the other projects, before the Acolyte that got canceled or discontinued that kind of make this just another layer on the cake. I feel like at this point we just have a tower of canceled projects that just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it's just getting to the point where, Lucasfilm just keeps kind of aimlessly wandering around going, oh, what are we going to try next? What are we going to try next? What's going to be the next big thing? I don't really care if Star Wars is the next big thing right now. I'm a fan of the franchise regardless. I just want to see the stories told and told completely. But with that, guys, I hope you enjoyed just this little rant sesh. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Again, just I want to have some discourse here. I want to know what your thoughts are, have some conversations in the comments. Maybe we can get some good discourse going just to talk about, the current state of the Star Wars fandom. And with that, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did and you're not yet subscribed, subscribe to Blitz Transmissions. I've got awesome Star Wars content coming out all the time. Make sure to check out my social media. I've got links for all of that in the description below. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you for the next one, and may the Force be with you.